Hey everybody, can I just say thank you so much for coming out to Botany. Great to be with you today. Happy to take any questions.
Can you explain to us about where your position is with the bed tax? A couple of weeks ago, that was something you consider when you signed the Auckland deal with Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown. You said it was something you were committed to exploring in 2027. What happened?
Well, the choice is pretty clear. National's coming out today saying no new taxes. Labor and their mates want 9 new taxes. Very simple choice. Labor, the party of more tax. National, the party of less tax.
In that short amount of time?
Yeah, so in that period of time, what we've determined is there was no other way that it wouldn't flow on and actually hit a Kiwi family or a Kiwi couple going out to for a weekend away in Queenstown or in Auckland. We understand the real challenge that many of our regional centres are facing with the pressure of tourism and the cost of tourism, and we will look to support the mayors, the councils in those regions, but we're not going to do it through levelling a tax on people.
You're going to be pretty upset about this. From what I understand, Wayne Brown's office feels a bit aggrieved at the fact that you signed this deal, committed to a bed tax investigation in 2027, and now you're saying no more.
Well, we're very committed to the problem that we need to solve, which is the cost of tourism, but we are not going to do that, and we couldn't find a way to do it through an accommodation levy that would end up hurting everyday Kiwis who are just going away for a weekend in Auckland or Queenstown.
Shouldn't banks be paying their fair share of taxes?
Well, I'll let Nicola talk to our position on that.
Yes, they should be, and we have already introduced a prudential levy so that banks are paying for the cost of their own regulation, but we do not think there are any new taxes because the risk is that the cost passed on to New Zealanders and the interest they pay on. We're not prepared to take that risk.
Minister, the day after the budget, you said, and I'm quoting you here, as a minister in this government, I'm still actively considering the taxation of banks and what that will look like. As a National Party finance spokesperson, if this government isn't able to make further decisions on that, then I do expect that we will take policies to the campaign. We've got to make sure the banks are being fairly taxed. Same question, what has changed between when you said these comments and today?
Well, I have looked at what the banks are being taxed at now and measures for changing that, and there are no other measures that I can see won't result in additional costs for Kiwis. So what's changed is my concern that there isn't a mechanism that won't end up being borne by everyday people on their mortgage or their bank fees, and I don't want that. I'm really concerned that Kiwis not face the cost of additional taxes, and while we looked at alternative mechanisms, none of them stacked up against this simple rule: no more costs for Kiwis.
Do you commit as well to not increasing any existing tax or levy or fee or charge in your next term? Is that what you're saying here?
We're saying no new taxes.
What does that mean in terms of the petrol or the levy? You talked about
maybe
delaying that. Where's that?
Well, we've talked about that. So obviously an existing tax has been a feature of New Zealand's system for decades. But what we've said is in the first term, we decided not to increase it. That's been unlike Labor, who would have increased it. We've also said it's highly unlikely we will progress that on January the 1st. But we also need to acknowledge that is the way that we actually fund and invest in our roads as well. So, but this is about no new taxes, and I can't be clearer. You know, this is the fundamental choice of this election. You know, you've seen a Labor Party that wants to spend more, they want to tax more, and they want to borrow more, versus responsible economic management that actually grows an economy and improves affordability for all New Zealanders and stops Labor's tax grab. That's the choice that they have at this election. More tax from Labor, less tax from National.
So I assume this covers the congestion tax as well. That's off the table?
Well,
well, time of use charging has already been legislated for, in fact, almost unanimously by the whole Parliament. That scheme is something for councils and critically is only to be paid by those who are using roads at that particular time, with all revenue being used to further transport investment.
So no new taxes being anything from here onwards if something has previously been legislated, then that's
I can reassure you we are not introducing a capital gains tax, we're not introducing a wealth tax, an inheritance tax, a gift tax, a 45% increase in the income tax, a $5 billion tax on businesses, an increase in business tax rates, and the list goes on and on and on. That is not happening. National is about no new taxes, Labor is about 9, and their mates are about 9 new taxes.
Do you not think it's a bit unfair for councils here that on the one hand you're saying you're going to cap the amount of rates that they're allowed to charge their constituents, but on the other hand essentially putting the brakes on them, saying you're not allowed to derive new revenue from things like a bed tax?
Well, what we're saying is we understand the pressure and the cost that tourism creates in many councils across the country. Rest assured, we are going to support and to help them with that cost of tourism. We just cannot do it through a mechanism that is a bed tax that ends up actually being paid for by regular Kiwis going away for a weekend in Queenstown or Auckland or Rotorua, wherever they may be. We are not in the business of passing costs and tax on to working New Zealanders. You saw that. The first move we made as a new government was to actually reduce taxes, the first time in 14 years for working New Zealanders. So we are the party of less tax. Labour is the party of more tax. We're committing in this election no new taxes. Labour and their mates want 9 new taxes. That's so they can continue their addiction to spending, their addiction to borrowing, and their addiction to tax.
You've said today that Labour make it clear that their new capital gains tax is the only tax change they'll implement, but that's exactly what has been said. So
Well, that is so wrong.
Well, that's misleading, isn't it?
Yeah.
That is very misleading from Chris Hipkins, because just a fortnight ago he proposed $5 billion of additional tax for New Zealand businesses by pledging to remove the investment boost tax credit that currently reduces the tax bills of those investing in machinery, equipment, technology. He's proposing to increase the tax bill of every single business making those investments. At the same time, he has waxed lyrical for 2.5 years about imposing more taxes on landlords, which of course would end up being borne by tenants. So I think it's silly for him to say that there's no other tax policy coming from Labour when he's already showed how mealy-mouthed those words are.
And can I just say, that investment boost program, I was with actually farmers on Thursday night in Napier, and I'm telling you, they were telling me that was the single biggest thing that made them invest in new plant, capital and equipment on farm to make themselves more efficient, more productive, so they could hire more workers. And they were extremely positive about it as being the single biggest thing that we've done for them that actually helps them improve their business. And when Chris Hipkins wants to put a $5 billion tax hit on those farmers and on those small businesses by not supporting investment boost, when he actually wants to continue to, who knows whether they're doing a streaming tax or not. We saw that show last week. So let's be under no illusion. We've seen it before. We're going to see it again. They want to spend more, they want to tax more, and they want to borrow more. We have fundamentally different ways to manage this economy and to take New Zealand forward. And saddling our kids up with debt, saddling New Zealanders up, working New Zealanders up with more tax is not the way forward. Not the way forward.
This is obviously an MMP environment. How can you be so sure that a government you lead won't need, obviously you'll need the likes of ACT and New Zealand First on current polling. What if they want new taxes?
Well, I'm saying to you very clearly, we are a party, and you've actually seen it in our government, even in this last 3 years. All 3 parties signed up to the national initiative to lower taxes for working New Zealanders. It was the first thing we did, first tax relief for New Zealanders in 14 years.
So in your coalition
all parties signed up for that.
In your coalition agreement, you will have no new taxes.
We're very clear. We're very clear about what the National Party stands for. You've seen that. We've demonstrated that to you in the last 3 years.
Environment.
Sure.
Your coalition agreement going forward, will this be solidified in concrete in your coalition agreement, no new taxes in the government that you lead?
Yes, yes.
Labour says that a vote for you is a vote for cuts, given that you're going to be raising more revenue through taxes. What will you have to cut?
A vote for Labour is a vote for more taxes. They just confirmed it in their own press statement. In fact, today they put out a plan that is based on increasing government spending to 33%. Well, the only way they can do that is with more tax revenue. So the only bit they're not telling you is what new taxes they're going to impose. We say no.
I want to be very clear about this. They have gone off to the New Zealand people and said there is $18 billion of free spending promises. How are they going to pay for it? And we know how they're paying. They're revealing their hand right now, which is it's a $5 billion tax hit to small businesses. It's the implementation of a CGT, which hits every business, every New Zealander up and down this country. And it's actually a whole bunch of other hidden taxes. So they have to fund $18 billion of so-called free spending and be under no illusion. It's not free. It's either going to be more tax, which it definitely is, 9 new taxes with them and their mates, and it's also going to be more borrowing, which is loading it up on our kids and our grandkids. And that's the mess that we've been cleaning up the last 2.5 years. And that's why I say to New Zealanders, you're going to November the 7th with a very, very clear choice and very, very different visions of how to move this country forward.
In your fiscal strategy, or your fiscal rules, you said 30% of core crown spending. Labour want 33. Nicola Willis, do you know the dollar value between those two numbers?
Look, it's several $billion. I think our estimate is between 8 and 12 billion, depending on the fiscal year. But the question is, where's that coming from? Revenue, i.e. tax. It's coming from New Zealanders' back pockets. And so this is the lesson that Labour have never learned, which is unless you're disciplined about spending, you end up taxing people more. National understands that by being careful with your money, we can also ensure we don't impose any new taxes on Kiwis.
And they also want a budgetary planning office. Is that something that you're open to as well?
Well, we already have an independent fiscal institution in the form of the Treasury. They provide independent forecasts and they do a very good job of that. I've previously talked about thinking that there is a job to be done in terms of making budget costings available for political parties, but I think that should be done in a really light touch way using existing resources. I reject the idea of a brand new bureaucracy that New Zealanders have to pay for and with more tax.
Yeah.
And
Last
just
one.
very quickly, just on the you didn't support the ACT Party's Treaty Principles Bill, so do you support the new package of constitutional reforms that they outlined today?
Look, I haven't had a chance to see what they're proposing. You know, what it's really about is making sure all public services are delivered to New Zealanders, all New Zealanders on the basis of need. But I'm telling you, the most important thing is tax, because this is what this election is going to be about. A National Party that's promising no new taxes, a Labour Party and their mates who want 9 new taxes. The choice is really stark for New Zealanders. That's the core issue of this election campaign.
Cool,
Thank you.
Okay,
very
Dave,
much.
thanks so much.